As mentioned, I'm Wendy Zellner. I'm a researcher. I'm a research plant physiologist with the USDA Agriculture Research Services. I'm stationed out of Toledo, Ohio, so I'm born and raised Northwest Ohio. And what I'm here today to talk to you is about silicon, which is will be the next essential element. So starting off, how many people have heard of silicon? Maybe not in reference to plants, but just in everyday. So what silicon is, it's actually an element. It's the second most available in the soil. So it's everywhere around us. We actually come into silicon every single day of our lives. It's in our water, it's in our food, it's in fertilizers, pesticides, it's in the soil, it's in cosmetics, electronics. Silicone is a form of silica. And so there's this overabundance of silicon that we live in and that we have all evolved in. Silicon is an essential nutrient for humans, for animals, and it is an essential plant nutrient. And if we look at how much is being removed here in the United States, on average, we're taking out 28.7 pounds of silicon per acre. And that might not seem like a lot, but if you look at corn, so when you grow corn here in Michigan, you're removing 67.6 pounds of silicon per acre. Wheat, 44.4, potato, 37, barley, 25.4, oat, 22.1, and soybean, 2.6. And now these numbers might seem low, but this is just based on your production weights. Amorphous silicon, on the other hand, this is a form when living organisms take up silicon and deposit it in their cells. Instead of being in this highly crystalline form, it's a more relaxed form, so it breaks down a lot more easily. So it doesn't take as much time or effort to release these single subunits, which are referred to as silicic acid. Silicic acid is your plant available form. So when you start thinking of silicon as a plant nutrient, you want to know in your cropping system how much silicic acid you have available to those plants. And so plants actually take the silicic acid up through the roots and transport it to the leaves of the plants. And they've actually broken plants up into 3 different categories. You have high silicon accumulators, and this is all based on how much silicon is up in the leaves. So when they started classifying plants, they just looked at leaf tissue. So your high accumulators are your grass species, your grains, so your corn, your wheat, your barley, rice. And what's interesting about these plants is they take silicon up like a straw. They suck it up out of the soil solution into the roots and just keep shipping it up into the leaves. And they take up anywhere from 1 to 10% silicon on dry weight. So that's 1,000 to 10,000 parts per million of silicon is taken up by these plants. So physically is best understood because it's easy to see, especially in our high accumulators. As they keep shipping that silicon up, what they actually do is they deposit it in the leaves and the stems of the plant, and that's what gives the extra strength with silicon to these plants, which in wheat can resist lodging. It helps reduce transpiration. The one main thing that silicon does as a defense, it increases tolerance to stress in plants. And there's this effect called priming. And what priming is, when you feed a plant silicon, and it comes into contact with an environmental stress or disease, it can respond much more rapidly than plants that weren't fed silicon. So as I mentioned, stress tolerance is the #1 positive benefit of silicon that you'll see the most, especially if you have deficient plants and you start feeding them silicon. It's just like other plant nutrients. It's important for maintaining that health. So it's not going to take care of all the problems. It's not going to take care of all the disease, but it's going to give you that healthier plant that can fight off disease and stress. And so here's just a couple examples. Here's a corn plant under drought stress. And so this one is fed with silicon and this one isn't. And you see the thicker, larger leaves compared to the non-silicon treated. And then here, in response to a pathogen, these are rice leaves with a fungal disease, rice blast. And you see, as I mentioned, that priming effect, you see very small little pinpoints of necrosis or those darker lesions. And what this is showing, that this leaf responded much more quickly to that infection. It can stop that infection and keep it from spreading, and it actually kills the fungal hyphae. Whereas when it wasn't fed silicon, you have much more chlorosis and larger lesions. What you need to think about when you start thinking about silicon as an essential nutrient, what are your levels in your cropping system? How are your plants responding to that? And then when you start looking, there's a number of different products that are available to you. You have both liquids and solids. Liquids are great for a quick fix. So liquids are usually applied to the leaves, but when silicon moves up through a plant, it's traveling through the xylem, which means that it's an immobile element. So once it gets into the leaf, it's not going to remobilize out of that leaf and move up in the plant. So one of the disadvantages of foliar spray, even though you can get a quick response because going from the root, it's going to take longer for uptake, you have to keep reapplying it as you have new stress and the plants grow out of that because they'll deposit it as needed. One of the nice things of having it down in the soil solution is you can't add too much. You won't have the toxicity effect because the plant will regulate how much silicon it's going to take up. And if it doesn't need silicon, it will down-regulate transporters and it will only allow for a certain amount to move up into the leaf. So with that, there are a number of products that you can do incorporation into soils. You can do field dressings, foliar applications. They come from a lot of different sources. There's mined rocks, there's volcanic rocks, there's recycled slags and other recycled glass material that all are these new products that are coming out or that have been out, that they're realizing why they were working is because they were providing silicon before we really understood what silicon was.